Okay, how's it going, everybody? Nice to see you all here today. This is the last speaker series of the semester, so thank you all for joining. For those of you who are online or watching this secondhand on our resource compass, we have 615 incubator members who join us in startup space. So if you would like to rewatch any part of this, the recording will be published for you, and we are recording it as well for our incubator members who couldn't attend today. So a little bit about SpartUp. SpartUp is the entrepreneurial ecosystem here at San Jose State. We have the speaker series program, workshops, we do competitions, and we have programs here to support entrepreneurs of any background, anyone who's a Spartan. So whether you're a student, faculty, alumni, or staff, we have resources to help you grow your startup and really get you launched on your entrepreneurial journey here at San Jose State. So I want to give a quick shout out. I know we have the Silicon Valley Innovation Competition coming up, and is Professor Basu still here?
Yes.
When is your pitch workshop?
Pitch workshop is on Monday.
Okay, so this Monday at what time?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock, what room?
In the Ideas Lab.
In the Ideas Lab, 3 o'clock, there's an amazing workshop going on. Does everyone know where the Ideas Lab is in the Student Union? I would imagine so. It's on how to build a great pitch. So this is in anticipation for the Silicon Valley Innovation Competition. I trust that a lot of you are competing. I wish you good luck. But it is a great first step to make sure that you're prepared to take full advantage of this competition by attending the workshop on Monday. So please attend. I'm sure they have a registration form online, but if not, if you don't register, show up 3 o'clock on Monday, and you'll get to meet up with a lot of great entrepreneurs and leaders in that space. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get us started here today. I'm one of the moderators. My name is Max Roth, and I'm the program manager for SpartUp. I'm going to have Angel introduce herself, and then each of the panelists will do a brief intro about each of you all, and then we'll dive right into questions.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Angel. I'm a senior here at San Jose State University and also the co-founder of Credit Click. Excited to be here and
Hi, my name is Chris Falayan. I'm a serial entrepreneur, several exits, and I'm glad to be here. I went through the system about 20 plus years ago, so I'm an alumni of San Jose.
I'm Josh. I work at a company called Deal. I work in mobility and immigration. I primarily focus on working with international founders who are trying to relocate to the US. So I specialize in work visas, green cards, you name it. That's what I do.
Hi, I'm Gloria Maseko. I'm the CEO and founder of Silicon Valley Advantage. We are a technology, biotech, sustainability accelerator. I started the company about 9 years ago. As many of you know, accelerators are a place where startup companies can come and we help them grow their business, particularly in US, but globally. And we bring companies certainly from US. We form some companies from university technologies and from around the world. And we're now working with the city of San Jose to potentially establish an accelerator for the city here, very close to university, and have the university be one of the feeds into a more commercial, professionally run accelerator. So I'm really looking forward to connecting with the university closely and kind of bridge that connection between university startups and the more commercial form of acceleration.
Hi, I'm Havra. I am an international student at Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. Currently, I'm interning at a venture fund, and I also work in documentary filmmaking. Yeah.
And before we dive into our first question, I want to say Havra was actually someone who participated in our summer intensive program. So in SpartUp, we had a 3-week summer intensive program that matched San Jose State founders with funders, so essentially people training to become venture capitalists. So Havra was one of the people training to be a future VC. She joined us at San Jose State, and we had a lot of amazing workshops and roundtables with people from both sides of the table. So founders and funders, and maybe at some point in the workshop or afterwards you can hear a little bit more insight from her about that. So just first question, and everyone can join in however they see fit or not at all. But interested in early stage startups particularly. We have the most diverse campus here of all CSUs, and in California, one of the most diverse student bodies. How do diverse viewpoints and people from different countries, international students, help accelerate innovation and problem solving for those early stage startups, whether they're the founder, the initial founder, a co-founder, or a first, second employee at this early stage?
How is the question?
Yeah, how? In a broad sense.
Yeah. Well, you know, first the rule of how is participate, right? If you participate, you're half the battle. So I highly encourage participation at any level. You don't have, a lot of people think in order to be a part of a startup, you have to have invented something. That's far from the truth, right? There's usually one or two inventors, early stage or later stage, and everybody else are groups that join the company later. You could be a business student, a media student, a marketing student, or an engineer and join. The different viewpoints from around the world really helps companies, because, you know, companies ideally can grow larger than they can even envision with global access, right? I mean, Silicon Valley is a fantastic place to start. It's a great place to germinate your idea and move it. But eventually, a successful company is a company that has a global expansion view. And so being from other countries certainly helps address the markets in other countries that we don't necessarily think of in US. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say 60% of unicorns in the United States are founded by immigrants, and 80% of public companies in the United States have an immigrant on their executive team or as a founder. And when it comes to being innovative and creative, the worst thing that you could have is a bunch of people in the room that think the same thing and think the same way and have the same cultural lens. And so it's super important, especially in the early stage when you're exploring like product market fit, to have diverse opinions, because people will challenge. Maybe that's not the right way to develop this product, and they'll bring unique points of view that might not be present in like your culture, or you might not think that way. So even like the way you speak, the language you speak can, as like your first language, can change the way you kind of think and structure sentences. So I just think, yeah, diversity is super important. It's what makes the United States such a tech giant, is because of immigration. And yeah, it's really cool. If you can have that on your team, you should absolutely do that.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said. The only thing I'll add is networking. If you are from another region or another area, you probably also have that network, that local network in that country that you can tap into while expanding your brand or expanding your idea globally. So not only do you have the knowledge and information from that country, you also have the network in that country, or potentially have that network in that country to expand your product or your idea. And networking, as you guys probably know, is super important for any kind of business to exist and succeed. If you don't have a network as part of your business strategy, don't even start the company, because you're wasting your time, because network is part of the elements needed to grow and have a successful company. So I would add network to the list.
Chris, I just want to ask you a follow-up question. Should startups in their early days stay local or go global from day one?
Well, I'm known to only build global companies, so I'm biased with that one. All my companies are global. The largest one was in 86 countries. So I don't know how to build local companies. It's just not something I know. I would say, because of the way the world is right now, and with people using terms like global economy and economies from other regions of the world affecting the US economy and us affecting theirs, it's probably best to think global. as opposed to think local, but it also depends on the idea. If the idea is, you know, just a local mom and pop shop, you know, doing something sustainable in that community, yeah, there's no reason why you should even go outside that township. But if it's a product that you feel other people in other communities, other countries can use and access, I would 100% look at that, because you just never know how they might use that product and respond to that product, and it could even be better than the people in your local community, because many people, you know, are very ingenious and they know how to utilize products different ways. So you might have built it for A and B, but then it goes to another country and they use it for C and D, which you never thought about, because, you know, they're looking at it from a different lens. They're looking at your product from a different lens than you were. So I would definitely highly recommend a global approach to most products.
And I would add to that, you know, few startups have the luxury to start global. You know, you always build local and think global, right? Because the resources, realistically, the resources of a small startup are not enough to go global right away. But you have to think global, and I totally agree with you. It's the think of global, and at the right time when you have the resources, the funding, and the wherewithal to go global, then you do it. But there are companies I've seen that do it too early, and it's cause for failure because they just stretch themselves too thin, too fast, and unfortunately, you know, you have to balance everything when you're building a company.
Gloria, that's very, very interesting. I have a follow-up question for you. How can you validate the right time as a small company to go global?
You can't. That's the true answer. The true answer of a startup is, why doesn't everybody become an entrepreneur? Because it's risky, because there is no definitive answer, because not one formula works for everything. So if you don't have the tolerance for risk, if you don't have the tolerance for I will try it and see if it works, then you really don't have the entrepreneurship spirit and what it takes, because reality is that every step of the way as you're building a company, you're gonna hit bumps, whether it's going global at the right time or not, which country specifically, right? What product are you offering where? Every step of the way, especially if it's something new, right? Which you know, new tech tends to be new, is you can look at parallels, you can see where successes have come from, and you can try to avoid the obvious mistakes. But the reality is that you have to, and as I think this gentleman mentioned, if you have the network in the specific country. So for example, I had a lot of relationships in Taiwan. So when I set up Silicon Valley Advantage, as an accelerator, one of our first agreements were with the Ministry of Science and Technology of Taiwan. Why is that? Because I had the connections there, yeah? The network that was needed. Same thing with Finland. I happened to have done a lot of work with Finland, and it's a great innovation place, especially when it comes to wireless, AI, data, optics. Small country, 5 million people, but lots of innovation. So it depends on where your connections are. As a startup, you really have to be smart and look at where is the low-hanging fruit, where you have the connections, where you know the language, where you understand the culture, and go to those places first, and then go from there.
Thank you.
So, and you talked a little bit about challenges, and I want to start with you, Havra. As an international student and an international founder, what are some of the most common challenges and bumps that you see? And in terms of takeaways, like where do you go for help for some of these things? What are the most beneficial resources?
The thing is, the biggest barrier would be the things you can and can't do as an international student. And protecting your F1 status is so important, because if you violate that, you're immediately kicked out or deported. So it's the biggest barrier is obviously working with the rules, and then working within your major as well, because you're limited to that. When you graduate, you get the chance to work in OPT, for example. And I hope many of you already know this, but I didn't know this till my senior year, was that if you have a STEM degree, you get to do OPT for 3 years versus a non-STEM when you get to do it for 1 year. And if you're a founder, you can actually build your company on CPT and OPT, but only if it's related to your major. So there's a lot of things to consider. And I go to the internet. I go to my international students office. I reach out to places like you, for example, or I reach out to Mash, because he has so much knowledge about that. And
everyone knows Mash is our director. Mash is the director of SpartUp.
Should have mentioned that. I think your best case scenario is to reach out to people who've already done the work. If you've just come in as a freshman, go to senior international students and see what they've done, the steps they've taken to, like, if they're a founder, found their company, if they're in the works of it. Yeah.
That's great. If anyone has anything they want to add on to that.
Yeah, so first of all, I'll say I'm not an immigration attorney, so none of this is legal advice. But yeah, we work with so many, I get to work with so many people on F1 status who are on CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, and you know, like what you were saying about like F1 being such a difficult situation to be in, and like this weight on the back of your head, it's so true. Like so many international students just feel this huge weight. And then you're absolutely right, like the degree, what you choose to study, like I studied international community development. I still kind of work in that space, but I studied it to work in NGOs, and now I'm working at a tech startup, right? So I'm not even working in the same field, and so yeah, setting yourself up for success like starts way back when you make that initial decision. But when you're back, you can't change the past, and oftentimes you don't know you want to be a founder. There are some ways to kind of work around the system a little bit. There are some visas out there, like work visas, for example. There's this visa called the O1. You may have heard of it. It's for extraordinary people. But it works really well for early stage startup founders, and it doesn't have to relate to your degree. So you don't need a degree related to that, which allows a lot of founders to even drop out of college and get that visa. The most tricky part of it is, yeah, if you can work for a startup on OPT. CPT is a little bit more difficult, but there's some nuance there, and there are ways that you can make it work. And you can work for your own startup as a founder on STEM OPT, but there is nuance there, which I'm happy to discuss after this, that you have to be aware of. But yeah, it can be tricky if you don't have a degree. But if you do OPT, that 1 year is a fantastic time to run with your startup idea, because OPT is the most flexible status you will have as a student to build your own company, and you can attend an accelerator, which is a great way to launch your company. And typically, once you have raised funding after getting through an accelerator program, you're in a place where you'd qualify for an O1 work visa, which can be obtained pretty quickly. So if you are in that situation, take advantage of OPT. If you are not a graduate yet and like OPT is a few years ahead, I would be happy to talk after this as well.
And I would say find a mentor. That's the biggest thing. There are, and we're fortunate, right? We're in Silicon Valley. Hey, I'm a female founder. I was an international student. I'm not American born. And you know, I'm on my 8th startup. So the opportunities here are unlimited. But one of the ways is to, after graduation is, you know, it's not always the best option to jump right into entrepreneurship, frankly. Going to a big company, getting a job, getting all these different visas I'm not familiar with, but that's a good way to go. Because it gives you some stability. It also gives you some experience, right? I mean, I had a great job and training at AT&T. That's a massive company, but it enabled me to do all the things that I have done afterwards. So, going straight from being a student, whether you're an international student or not, straight into entrepreneurship is not always the best unless you just have such a spectacular idea that just can't wait. So how many people in the audience here have an idea, want to start a company, are a part of startups or a part of your accelerator and any?
Yeah, so raise your hand if you're a founder. Raise your hand if you're looking to join a founder, be a part of a startup. Raise your hand if you're just interested in entrepreneurship. And then raise your hand if you're an international student. Okay?
Wow.
All right, we know our audience.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
That always helps, right?
Absolutely.
Knowing your audience.
So Joshua, I have a question.
Yes.
What can I raise funding on an F1 visa?
That is a great question. Typically you can, because the issue with F1 and with working from an immigration perspective is really, are you actively working or doing what is considered passive work or passive activities? And typically somebody on like a visitor visa, like a B1, B2, or an ESTA, which are these visitor visas that entrepreneurs might use to come to visit the US, they're coming for the purpose of raising funding or to go to an accelerator program, and they're able to do those tasks without work authorization or a work visa because it's kind of considered passive. Anything that's passive is really knowledge exchange, like you're coming to the United States for meetings, you're talking with people, you're exploring product market fit, you're going to an accelerator to explore and take this idea to the next level, you're meeting with potential customers, you're raising funding, so you're talking to VCs in Silicon Valley or SF. So typically, you can incorporate a company, but you can't have an active role in the company, which is a tricky situation to be in. So it's immigration is super nuanced. It's not black and white. If you are on F1 and you want to be a founder, people do it all the time. People do it all the time. There's ways to do it legally without risking your status. You should talk to an immigration attorney. We have a great team of legal experts who can kind of help you navigate that. But the bottom line is there's a lot of things you can do on F1, like potentially attending an accelerator program or talking to investors, looking for co-founders, incorporating. You can incorporate, but you can't hold like an active day-to-day role with the company. So like sometimes like coding the product, which is essential if you're forming a tech company or the CTO, could be construed as active work because that's something that somebody would typically be paid for. It's more than knowledge exchange. And so, yes, and there's nuance to it. Everything with immigration it's like nuanced conversation, which is why it's really important to talk to like mentors, like people who've done this before, who are immigrants who came to the country and have gone on to successfully be founders, or students that are like beyond like on OPT, who've graduated, but also talking to people that this is what they do day to day, and they have the degree to help give you legal advice, for example.
So I have a question, and start with Chris and Gloria. I mean, as founders who were international students, what is the biggest thing that's changed when you guys founded your first startup companies to today that you think has provided a big advantage for students, whether or not you think it's mainstream and well known in the community, or it's just something that has existed and hasn't been celebrated and talked about enough?
I would say the average age here is post-internet, but there is a big one. Okay, when I started my first company, not so available. So the resources that now you have access to, information in general, is unbelievable, right? The other part is accelerators. I mean, when I started my first company, there were so few accelerators, even in Silicon Valley, very few. Now, in every city, every country, I mean, we just had a contingency from Guatemala in our office. And they have an accelerator in Guatemala, right? Who knew? And they're focused especially on female founders. You wouldn't normally think that, right? Of a country that is just kind of even struggling economically. So I think access to information, the idea of tech accelerators that are now sponsored and paid for by so many cities, by so many countries, and this whole global connection of being able to connect globally to Silicon Valley and to Arizona is growing huge, Austin, Texas, I mean, just North Carolina, everywhere you go, Chicago, everywhere you go, internationally or US, there is an accelerator. A lot of them are specialized in, we specialize in AI, sustainability, climate change, because we feel that's important, as well as biotech. And of course, semiconductor, just because we have a lot of, we have 50 plus advisors, a lot of them have great experience in semiconductor sensors. I mean, there's a sensor everywhere, sensing everything we're doing, right? So everything we're eating, moving, changing. So it's a huge advantage now to access so many resources that frankly, most of them are free, right? I mean, you have accelerator at the university. It's certainly when I was at University of Texas in Arlington, we didn't have an accelerator. So the exposure and access to information is massive, and I think it's made a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, I think for me, one big difference between when I started my first startup, which was just as I graduated here, is failure. So failure now is accepted, and back then it was not. And I'll explain this because from the hands that went up, I think it's important for you guys to know. You learn, and this might sound counterintuitive, but you learn way more when you fail. Way, way more than when you succeed. If I was to talk to you and say, yeah, I built something and it worked right away. That means everything I did was perfect and I really didn't learn a single thing. But had I failed in trying to build that company along the way, a misstep or a pivot, and all that stuff, and it didn't really do well, I learned way more than that person who actually succeeded right away. So back with my first startup, I think failure was seen as a bad thing. You fail, we don't want to talk to you. Now it's seen as a badge of honor, which is good, and it should be seen. Now, investors won't like me saying that, and I get it. You want to see your money multiply, but as a founder and as a person who started a company, I can tell you I've learned way more than someone who has only succeeded and that alone. Jeff Bezos said it perfectly. He said, I'm not quoting him, but basically something of the fact that if we didn't fail as much as we did, we won't be as successful as we are, because they failed tremendously. Most of the products that they've put out there have failed. Now, you only hear about the ones that have done well, but trust me, there are many products that Amazon has kicked out that just did terribly well. And if Elon Musk hadn't failed with his rockets so many times, I mean, he wouldn't be where he is today, but he kept on failing. He learned from those failures, tweaked it, learned, tweaked, and boom, he was successful. So I think to me that's the biggest thing, and every entrepreneur should be 100% okay with failing, because trust me, you will learn way more from your failures than you will with just success alone. Success alone is awesome, but you don't learn anything with just success. You learn with failures. Success is just a good thing to have.
Speaking of failure being a badge of honor, Chris, I have a follow-up question. How does the Silicon Valley compare to the rest of the world in terms of supporting founders?
How do they run?
How does Silicon Valley compare to the rest of the world in terms of supporting founders?
Yeah, failure is a perfect way to start. I think Silicon Valley accepts failure, and they understand that as a badge of honor way more than, you know, where we're from. I'm from Nigeria. Their failure is not so lightly taken. I think we're still behind. But yeah, Silicon Valley definitely sees failure, and you're learning from that failure as a good thing. And the rest of the world, some countries are there, but emerging markets are definitely catching up to that knowledge and notion that failure is a badge of honor and should be accepted. To me, that's the big difference. Silicon Valley, if you've tried like 10 startups, you know, and they've all failed, they're like, you know, have you learned anything? And you say yes. I'm like, okay, the next one has a greater chance of success. So they'll probably, you know, really think about investing in you because you've learned so much and you're this wealth of wisdom because of all your failures. You're just a massive wealth of wisdom than someone who just succeeds. You know, I don't like those people.
And culturally, I think by countries, we had the German contingency a few years ago. It's still that way. You know, failure is not an option.
Yep.
And that's why most of the so-called startups that I've seen, for example, coming from Germany, are family companies. They just generationally have handed them over to the next generation and not really so much new innovation. They do a lot of things really well, but because that fear of failure or being branded as a failure is still a thing there, you know, the fear of innovation and starting something new is really very high, even in Western world, not let alone other countries.
Continuing on the global business side of things, I'm curious, this is an open-ended question for anyone on the panel here, but what advantages do a startup have entering international markets or being founded with the intention of expanding into international markets, whether you're founded by an international student or being an international founder or someone who grew up in the States?
But the biggest thing is market size, right? I mean, when a venture capitalist looks at your business plan and your pitch deck, the first thing they look at is how big of a problem you're solving and how big is your market. And if you don't have the global numbers in there, as big as US is, if you're starting your company here, and if you're starting in other countries, then it's certainly even smaller, the market size is just not big enough, and so it doesn't attract investors. So that's why we always have to have that global vision, even though they know as a startup you're not going to be able to address this right away. You know, you have to build in your own backyard first before you grow globally. But they want to see that you're able to assess and measure your market size globally, because that makes the company just that much more valuable. Your addressable market becomes that much bigger. Your the product plan and development becomes bigger. That's the value of the company. The bigger you are, the higher the value, right?
answer?
Absolutely, please.
Yeah, no, again, I totally agree. It's about market size, just as mentioned. So whenever you're building your deck, your pitch deck for any investor, you are more likely to get one, better engagement with the investor if your pitch deck has a more global view than if it just has, California or just North American view. You will definitely get more eyes open, more chances of investments from a global audience as opposed to just a local VC. So you're setting yourself up for better success, one, and two, a broader base of potential investors if you have a global footprint. And just as mentioned, even if your global footprint is not right away, when your deck should have between a 3 to 5 year projection, right? So even if it's not in year one, try your best to make it in year two. Now, you heard the fluctuation in my voice there. That was the reason. The truth is, I'm saying this, sorry. The truth is, you might not expand globally in year two, but you should still put it down that you're thinking about it, because what investors want to see is that you have that in your roadmap, and it's not too far in the future. If you're growing globally and it shows up in your deck in year 5, you just don't even put it in there. You're wasting your time. That's not going to give an investor a really good perspective on how they think you perceive your own business. Because if you're not expanding outside North America till 5 years from now, the investor will probably say, wow, you're not thinking big enough, or you don't have that much confidence in your own business idea to expand much more rapidly. So that's a reason why you need to, and the valuation of your company increases significantly, mostly if you show that your product can be used in various global markets. And you can prove that that's true. It's not just saying, hey, my product can be used in Kenya, but it's a ski rack. Like, you don't have snow in Kenya. So, you have to make sure it makes sense.
Really quick, before we move off of this, how does being an international student help you with the credibility of that pitch?
It doesn't.
Or does it?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
No.
And why is that?
Again, if your product is something, let's say, specific to Nigeria, right? Then it has some value because your product is specific to that market and Chris knows the Nigerian market, right? But if it's a general product that, it either has value, is solving a problem, or it doesn't, that's it. That's what investors look for. Big market, solving a big problem, unique, patent idea that you have patented. But just being an international student alone is not a negative, but it's not a big positive, realistically, in my opinion anyway. It just is what is. Maybe your global view, if you can connect your company with a global vision because you're from a different country and you understand the global view, and somehow you can, I gotta say this, a company is about storytelling. It really is. You gotta build a story. That story is either around you as an inventor, is you as an entrepreneur, is your product and the reason you invented it. But a good pitch deck tells a story that keeps people on the edge of their chair. They want to hear more. That's a good pitch deck. If you're telling your story to somebody you don't know, your fellow student or Max or Abby or anybody, and they're not sitting on the edge of their chair wanting to know more and how the story is being developed, you're not telling a good story. So yeah, it has value if you can connect where you're from, or being an international student, or being from Silicon Valley, or being a female, has a connection to the story you're telling about your company, then it has value, but not just as a standalone. That's my experience.
I want to add that like value it doesn't always appear in the most obvious ways, and just having a foot in the international market can sometimes, generate profits, for example, in a really bizarre way. Like, for example, if you all are familiar with Revant Optics, they source their lenses from China, and when COVID-19 hit, the US ran out of PPUs, and so the CEO, Jason Bolt, he used the factory where he got those lenses from and got them to make PPUs and had them delivered to the US. And that was his alternative way of making money, just because he had those connections in China. So even if it's not related to your product specifically addressing that global market, involving people and places from around the world can be really, really useful.
Speaking of expanding internationally, should startups look into partnering up with local corporates in countries they want to expand to, or should they just expand?
Definitely partner. A startup is just not powerful enough, big enough, resourceful enough to do everything on their own. And it's not just even internationally, locally. I mean, what I call strategic partnership is really the biggest value that, the biggest thing that a business development person, a CEO can do. You have to connect yourself to a bigger company with a lot more resources, a big distribution globally that can pull you up. That's a strategic partnership. And so do that locally. If you're making a sensor, you gotta go find a manufacturer that is interested in your sensor, that has the experience to commercialize a sensor, that can redesign your sensor for mass manufacturing. That's a strategic partnership. And typically, if they're big enough to do that, they also have global access, right? They also have the global distribution. So as a startup, I think it's generally, not in every case, but we're talking about 85% of the cases, you want to partner with a bigger company that can help you and pull you up, whether it's distribution globally, manufacturing, funding, marketing. They just have the resources you don't, and the experience.
I'll add to that. So with every startup and every business, I've mentioned this several times. Not here, but you need what I call PINK, P-I-N-K. You guys can write it down on a piece of paper because it's super important. P is for passion, I is for innovation, N is for networking, K is for knowledge. What Gloria just mentioned was the networking part. Super important. Partnering with corporations because you can't lift yourself up as a startup. Totally agree, 100%. And the telling of the story is also super important, because if you can't tell a story to someone, not only the investor, but if you can't tell a story to the people you're selling your product to or your service to, you're also not going to succeed. You have to be able to tell that story in such a way that the person you're telling the story to is engaged, intrigued, and wants to hear more, wants to buy more, just wants to fall in love with your product and your business, no matter what it might be. So that's where the P would come in, right, for the passion, because you have to have a passion for your product. So the passion translates to the story, translates to the product. Innovation, if you're not innovating a new product and it's not something brand new, you are absolutely wasting your time because nobody wants to buy another loaf of bread. We have so many companies that are selling bread. So then the networking spoken about, knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge about your product, your industry or that industry and what you're bringing to the market, and you're trying to sell me something like MySpace, an old product that nobody cares about, or you want to sell me a BlackBerry saying, hey, this is the next new thing. Oh my goodness, go find a rock. You are not selling me anything new, and that's why you have to have knowledge and bring knowledge into the space. Amplify that knowledge, show that you're on top of it. So like today we were talking about generative AI, show that you're on top of that, and if that's the industry you're going into or whatever industry it is. Pink, if you have pink, you have yourself a really good business as long as you follow those 4 letters in that acronym. You're good to go.
Don't get a pink eye though.
Don't get a pink eye. Yes, please don't.
So I have maybe 2 more questions, but this one is the one that I'm most interested in, and it partners really well off of the knowledge part of Pink, right? So as we mentioned, San Jose State has an extremely diverse campus community, and I'm curious from your perspectives, how could this help students of any background help to validate their ideas, to come up with, or understand their customers better, understand their customer journey, and build better products or services?
From my perspective, reality is a reality check, right? We all have, I shouldn't say all, but most of us have some good ideas, right? We think it's a good idea, right? But if it's not validated with your brother and sister first, because they're your biggest critics usually, right? Your mom and dad, your friends in your media, but it truly is reality check. I'm a big proponent of come up with great ideas, be an entrepreneur, take risks, but just check in with reality. And reality is to check with that first customer you have in mind, whoever, that might be the university, right? It might be Abby at her innovation center. It might be a friend that loves the next Fruit Loop or something. But just check with reality of, if you get 5 mediocre responses, well, rethink your idea. Maybe it's not quite cooked well enough, it's not polished enough. But reality check is really important, because frankly, one of the biggest things that I've seen of companies coming from around the world to our accelerator, as I said, we bring tons of companies from Canada, Taiwan, Finland, Central and South America. Most of the time they think they've come up with a good idea and a technology, but they really haven't reality checked it. And if they have, it's with their own immediate market and not outside of it. Some of them, shockingly enough, haven't even Googled to see who else is doing it. I mean, come on, anybody can do that now, right? You gotta check and see, as Chris said, if there are 10 other companies that have come up with a similar idea and they're already way ahead of you, it's kind of tough to compete. So reality check is important. Check Google, check your competitors, learn from the competitors, and then find a niche for your idea. There will probably not likely that you're the only one that has come up with a new idea, right? Likely there was other similar ideas. But if you check and see who else has come up with a similar idea, but your idea has a specific niche, is better, is cheaper, it has more global attraction, then you adjust your thinking and pitch accordingly, and then it gives you an advantage.
I want to hear from the rest of the panelists on this subject, but just to that point, and I'm sure Professor Basu, who's in the audience, can attest to it. I know a lot of you compete in challenges and competitions on campus, such as like the Silicon Valley Innovation Competition, our prototyping challenge, the business plan competition, and the kiss of death is if you have a judge that says, have you heard of this thing that does exactly what you do? I can guarantee you're not winning the competition. So that is the best first step when applying to a competition and building out the pitch deck for your startup. So 100% agree with that notion. But does anyone else have anything to share on this subject?
I mean, I think having access to like a lot of diversity in the campus and like people to talk to it allows you to find co-founders and people to share ideas with. Like, life is not meant to be lived alone, and I don't think companies are meant to be created alone. We have like a loneliness epidemic in the United States. Like, it's a huge crisis, and it's easy to make decisions if you're a solo founder because you're the only one to make those decisions. But inviting people in to that, it makes it more difficult. But I think a lot of times you can innovate and actually get to the issue that you need to be solving. Even though it's more challenging. A lot of things that I get to see in my work is like founder splits, which is not fun because it destroys a company a lot of the times. And so it's also really important that you choose the right people to work with, and people that you don't get along with on day one, you might not be getting along with them on day 100. But also there's gonna be conflict, and so learning how to resolve, deal with conflict is super important. But yeah, I think it's really important, or like one of the huge advantages of like being at a university. Like, come on, like look around you, like look at all these people. When else in your life are you going to be in a situation like this, other than maybe when you're in an accelerator program? This is the time to network and meet people that are interested in doing this. Like, as soon as you graduate and you get a job, you'll have coworkers and you work your 9 to 5, or if you're at a tech company, I don't know, like your 7 to 6, and then you'll go home. This is the time that you will have people around you who are interested in this, and it's a fantastic time to take advantage of that.
Speaking of, how do you find co-founders? Like, what is the requirement? So what should someone look for when finding a co-founder?
Complementary skills, usually. You know, if you're an engineer and you've already come up with the idea, you need a business person to build that story. You need a marketing person to polish your story. So complementary skills is what makes a team, right? Like Chris just said, if you have 5 people of the same skill, same level of knowledge, they're happy with each other, but they're not really building something bigger than themselves. So that's really important. In fact, at the tour that Abby so kindly arranged for us, we were just talking about that. By the way, on campus, I think I mentioned it, there is a department called Global Education, right, Abby?
Yes.
Global Education Group, and they're setting up their own accelerator for soft landing of international companies coming from universities overseas, as well as the participation from students on campus into these companies. So it's a great bridge and exchange of ideas. But we were just, talking about that. Please don't do, and they were talking about, material scientists department is here, and the AI machine learning is in that same building. Like, okay, but what are the business students? What are the marketing students? You need all skills to build a company. It's not just the inventor. And so that's the best way to find co-founders, or people that are diverse thinking and have a complementary skills, in my opinion.
I would add to totally agree, first of all, but to add to that, you want to interview this person pretty well, because as mentioned, you're getting a lot of splits, and that happens, and I think that happens because people don't date right away. They just go ahead and get married, and you guys know, just meeting someone, unless you watch the TV show. Okay, let's move on. Now, if you don't watch that What's
Love
first?
is Blind?
No, the first date, is that Love is Blind? The one that you did get married
Yeah, is that Love is Blind?
or first date?
Where you get married? I'm like.
Anyway.
They don't
They don't
No
care.
one's seen it, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah,
It's just.
just you and I.
Yeah.
You two are reality TV watchers.
You don't want to you want to date before you get married to your co-founder, not not the ring, right? But before you get married to your co-founder, you want to date. And you guys know that the longer you date, the more you know the person, and you know those quirks about them that you might not like or that you like. Super, super duper important, because this person is going to be with you for 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. So if you're going to marry this person and you're not going to like them, let's spend the time dating and ensuring that this is a relationship that really holds water and you guys are really happy with. That person may be super duper smart, but you just don't get along. Don't get married, meaning they should not be your co-founder. You want your co-founder to be somebody that supports you, that likes you, enjoys being with you, because sometimes you're going to be working 24/7 on an issue or a problem that will come up, and problems will come up. Remember my whole failure speech? There will be times you might be failing and you have to have these tough discussions, just like in a marriage or just like in a relationship, tough discussions. So you need to make sure you can have these tough discussions with this person without them throwing a fit and just getting upset, because now you've been working for 6 months on this amazing project, but you didn't date, you just got married, and 6 months later you're splitting your company, and they have the tech, you have the marketing, the business isn't going to go anywhere. So the only thing I would add is interview or date your co-founder. It should not be a 1-day thing, a 2-day thing. It shouldn't even be a 1-week thing. Just spend time with them, get to know them really, really well before you say, hey, can you be my co-founder?
And also common goals are really important. Some founders, I'm a proponent of that. We build companies for successful exits. We don't build them so that we can keep them for 100 years around. If your co-founder is attached to the idea and wants to keep the company forever, and you want to exit at the first great opportunity, boy, that's usually a big problem, right? So it applies to co-founders, it applies to your board members. You really have to make sure that the ultimate goals are also in line, so that, out of many bumps that you expect to hit, that's not one of them. Are we going to open it?
Yes, so
okay.
I have one more. Thank you. I will say we've had 3 speaker series this semester. We'll have 3 more next semester. And this advice, this back and forth that we just had about co-founder dating has come up in every single one and several times in each one. So I cannot state enough how significant this is. I have one more question personally, and I'd like to open it up to audience questions, and that is for Havra specifically. As an international student and as an entrepreneur, if you could give one piece of advice to yourself or to any international student as a freshman or sophomore, something maybe you learned or that was really instrumental in your growth, what would it be?
I would say building a good network around you is so important, because you're coming into a new country and most of the times you have to completely rebuild your life and you don't know anybody. And sometimes it's about finding that one person who sticks by you, like always, like a mentor. And it doesn't have to be someone who has exited multiple companies, just somebody who knows better than you do and can guide you. I think that's so valuable, and not having your family with you especially, you need that kind of support system, just someone to rely on, even to cry in front of. I think looking back, I wish I had that my freshman and sophomore year, but I was also a COVID baby, and so that made all the difference as well. but I see how quickly my life or my career has grown when I started going to events and even reaching out to the Entrepreneurship Center at my school. It went from such a slow process to things happening within hours and days. So very, very important.
That's great, thank you. We're going to open it up to audience questions. Panelists, please keep your responses as concise as possible so we can get as many responses and questions as possible. We also, our pizza just got here, we're going to end the speaker series in about 15 minutes and we're going to have a networking hour. So some of the panelists are going to stick around. You'll have an opportunity to speak with them individually as well. Does anyone want to start us off? First questions?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you for all pieces of advice. I'm really happy to be here, to be part of this conversations. The first question is, when we are building our team, we are sharing our idea, we need different fields, tech, marketing, user experience designers. When we just start in the company, how would you say that after dating, we want to get married with someone, let's say like that, in terms of the sharing equity, who decides the percentage that it should be shared with other persons, and what is some piece of advice that you would have for this topic?
There are actually standards for that. So CEO gets a certain percentage, the business development vice president gets a certain percentage. They're common percentages that you should check the market and see what's the market value. Now, beyond that, of course, then is up to the founder and the CEO to some degree. But my advice always is be generous because, in startup, you don't have much money, so you gotta give shares, right, to attract people. Right. So be generous. However, tie it to milestones, right? Accomplishments. What do you want out of this person, out of each of these executives? If you tie the amount of shares and the percentage of shares that you're giving to milestones that you have collectively agreed to the company needs to achieve in order to be successful, then it motivates everybody and it's fair. When people accomplish and hit their milestones, then you're happy to give them more shares, right? But the ones that don't, for whatever reason, you don't want to end up with somebody that is just not accomplished much, hasn't moved the company forward much, and all of a sudden they have 10% of the company and you really need to get rid of them. That's not a good idea.
Thank you.
Josh, correct me if I'm wrong, but to apply for an O1 visa, don't founders need 50%?
No, not necessarily. So you can be, when it comes to applying to for an O1 visa, you could, if you're a majority owner of the company, it actually can be a little bit more complicated because there needs to be an employee-employee relationship, which is something that needs to be established for STEM OPT and CPT as well. But there are some things that we look for. For example, it's a work visa, has 8 criteria. You need to meet 3 of the 8 criteria. If you're saying that you're the co-founder of a company and you have 5% of the company and it just launched, and we're trying to build this visa around you being the successful founder, it's kind of hard to build an argument if your equity in the company isn't representative of that, and the other founders have 40%, for example. So yeah, but from the O1 visa perspective, there's no requirement. It's just nuanced. I'll say that word again. But yeah, I would say that to add to this, I think it's really important as an international student to value this, because I feel like there are situations because of you're in a vulnerable status with your immigration that people may try to take advantage of you in regard to equity. If you need to have somebody joining your board, for example, from an immigration perspective, or you need a co-founder. So it's just something to be aware of. I've seen it before, is that people will because you're in a vulnerable status, your immigration status is at risk and you need to move quickly on something, I've sadly seen people take advantage and get more equity than they should in the company. Yeah, so that's one thing I would add.
No, that was great. Thank you all. Another question?
Me?
We'll go 1-2. We'll go 1-2. Yeah, go ahead. Front row.
Yeah, you go. I just wanted to follow up on that question. To be a founder, do you need to have equity? Like, let's just say I don't want any equity.
Yeah.
I just want the experience.
Okay. Well, I guess my question would be, why don't you want equity if you're going to put in time? Is it because you're nervous about immigration, or like you don't want to be all in, or?
I'm not an like international student. I'm just like if you want to just build experience, I don't.
Give your equity to somebody else that wants
I'll
it.
take it.
I would say, so from the perspective of the manager of the incubator, we work with a lot of different founders. That's a very unique set of circumstances, and I'm sure there's a lot of founders in the room who would love to take advantage of your desire to gain experience. But in general, you should advocate for equity and want equity. And if you truly don't want any equity, you have to manage the relationship between what the transaction is, right? Because everything's transactional. So what are you offering and what are you receiving in return if equity isn't in the equation? Are you being paid really, really well? Is this going to help you accelerate your career, get a job that you really want after graduation? You have to consider all of those things to make sure that you're being taken care of in that transaction. But that's a unique perspective.
Maybe you want an internship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, Bala.
Okay. I want to build off this O1 visa you mentioned about it, and I just want to know, as a founder, what boxes do I have to check off to qualify for the O1?
Yeah, so with the O1 visa, we're really looking to prove that you're at the top 10% of your field. And so part of the application is defining what your field is. And so we have to show that you have accomplishments in that field. Very common for an entrepreneur would be your field's technology entrepreneurship. And then we're looking at these 8 different criteria. And you just need to meet 3 of those criteria. I don't want to go through all of them right now because it would take too long. I want to keep this short. But typically, if you've gone through an accelerator, you've raised a seed round, and maybe you have a little bit of press, announcing your round or mentioning that you've got into this accelerator program, and then you have some clients, maybe small clients or a partnership. For example, that's a good stage to file the O1, but it can vary. If you have previous professional experience, we can talk about that as well.
And these are all incredible reasons and incentives to participate in things such as the SpartUp Incubator, joining events, the Silicon Center for Entrepreneurship, competing in SVIC and things like this as well. Another question? Yes.
All right. So my question is, how important is technical skills in a startup in order to have a successful startup? And in your experience, what are the ratios of success rate of a non-technical founder and versus a technical founder?
Stephen Jobs, he was not technical. He surrounded himself with engineers that were, but that's a perfect example. Listen, innovation is not just technology, right? The reason solar took off was because of the innovation in the business plan. When people didn't have to buy solar panels because they were too expensive, the business plan to change the solar to a sort of rental agreement, if you will, lease plan, is what changed the solar market completely. So innovation is not always technology. It's a unique business plan. It's a unique marketing plan. I mean, look at all the companies that are successful. I mean, because we're in Silicon Valley, we're a little bit jaded, right? I mean, we just think tech. and that's okay because we can here. But when you look at successful companies, Amazon is not necessarily tech, right? They're just delivering stuff. So think outside of tech. If you're a business major, a marketing major, a media major, I mean, there are some huge media, global companies that are super successful. They use tech, but they didn't start as a tech company. So yeah, it's very possible.
Yeah, I'll add that, it's not. So are you more tech or less tech?
I am hoping to be more tech.
Okay. I like that.
Then
It's-
you're in the right place.
Yeah, it's not. You don't have to be super on the tech side to have a successful company. And in fact, I think there are really good arguments on both sides. One, if you have some really good tech, that's beyond amazing. But most people who have that are not really good marketers. We'll go back to the example with Steve Jobs and Wozniak. You know, one was a brilliant marketer, Jobs. Wozniak, brilliant developer, right? So I do think, you know, as Gloria has mentioned in the past, you need a complementary aspect. So if you're in the middle, you're in a unique spot, which is fantastic, which you have the business aspect and the technical aspect. But I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. I think they're both equally important, because you could also be a great marketer but have no amazing product, tech or not. You're a great marketer but nothing to sell. And you have great technology but nobody to sell it. So, you know, you need both. So I don't think one is more important than the other, to be honest.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more. One more. Sure.
Yeah. Chris, you mentioned that having failures is a good thing, right? But as an F1 student, I don't have much time, and I can't have like 10 failed startups. And how do you, like, what do you suggest? When I can't validate my solution, should I just change the problem and look for a different problem, or just pivot on my solution?
That's a good question. I think if you don't have too much time, pivoting is probably the best way to go. If time is an issue for you, pivoting is probably a better path than failure. Even though I'm a fan of failure, but yeah, I would say pivoting is probably a better path. That sounded bad, didn't it?
I don't think you're advocating intentional failure.
I'm not I'm not.
It's
but I'm
not
just saying,
intentional
yeah,
failure.
if you
it's just
fail,
that it will happen.
Yeah, you will fail, guaranteed. And when you fail, just make sure you learn from that failure to help you not fail the next time. But also note, the more times you fail, the better you are, because you have learned so much. But I'm not saying go out there and try and fail as many times as possible, because I can see where that will. So please don't get confused.
Yeah,
Please don't
I
get
had a
confused.
mentor, Mike, that was just a really tough guy. And I had done something wrong in a business that I was in, and he said, "Oh, come on, Gloria, you're old enough to know better than stop failing," you know, like, okay. You know, so it's not intentional failure, it's just that learning as an entrepreneur, when you do fail, just, you know, pick yourself up, dust off the failure and move on. That's what we're saying, because it's, you know, it's inevitable. So if you don't plan for it, but if it happens, get up and go.
And it will happen.
It will happen.
So get up and go.
Well,
So get up and go.
on that note, let's give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you all for being here.